and welcome to today's episode of Authentic Achievements, where it's my absolute delight to be joined by the fabulous Arielle Lechner. Arielle, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to this conversation. And I know from our previous chat that we could get stuck in really quickly. So before we do, let me just share with our audience a little bit more about you. So Arielle is an executive coach and the founder of NewPo, where she partners with CEOs, founders, and senior leaders navigating high-stake challenges and supports them along their quest to create new possibilities and transformational results. Prior to launching her coaching practice, she built her career leading go-to-market strategies for B2B SaaS and Web3 ventures. She's been featured in publications like Forbes, Nasdaq, and Thrive Global, and has lived in Montreal, Ottawa, San Francisco, New York City, and Reno before finally settling in Philadelphia with her husband, son, and dog. I mean, wow, what a journey! Not just in your career, but also journey. I mean, that's a number of places to live. Can you bring that a little bit more to life for us, please?
Yeah, I appreciate that and the comment. I don't think I've ever had anyone comment on that aspect of the journey. So I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and I went to college there, and then about when I was 23, I decided to move to San Francisco. I had studied political science. I thought I wanted to work in politics. I moved to Ottawa. I worked in politics for, I think it took me about 6 months for me to realize this wasn't quite for me. And I wanted to work in tech, in startups. And at the time, San Francisco was the place to be. In many respects, it still is the place to be, but I felt I needed to go there. And I did, sight unseen. I had never been there. I didn't know a single person, but I moved there. And that's really what started my career. I began working. I had worked on my own startup for a little bit that didn't end up working out, and joined another startup. I stayed there was in San Francisco for about 4 or 5 years. And then I moved to New York City with my husband, also working in tech and startups. And I'll pause there for a sec. I don't know if all the cities, like Reno, I didn't move for my career. It was my husband's career.
Okay. You still need to bring them all to life. You could just
I'll bring it all to life. Okay.
It was more the kind of the concept of the journey, and I guess for me, one of the kindred spirits is this is my 36th house since I left home at 21. So I have moved a lot for work. And whilst I wouldn't necessarily bring up, 36, can you imagine we were here all day? Yeah. But it was more the fact that actually what was some of the learns that I had was being brave enough to go somewhere I didn't know anybody.
Got it.
Seen anything. Yeah. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah, that helps. Maybe I want to redo it rather than like going through every little thing I did. I'll maybe share more of what led to some of these moves and like the insights.
Cool. So how about if it's a weird thing, I appreciate. I'm going to do a really loud clap and then I'll re-ask the question of can you bring this to life? It's easy to find in the edit.
Yeah.
A big spike and
right.
She's being a weirdo. So I'll ask the question again from wow, what a journey. Can you bring it to life for us?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Here we go. Wow. I mean, what a journey, Arielle. There's so much in there, not just moves in the business, but moves in location as well. Can you bring to life kind of the key elements of that for us, please?
Yeah, I think at the crux of it is a curiosity to leave what is, I grew up in Montreal, Canada. I went to school there. I stayed there until I was 23. So to leave a place that really the only place you've ever known, to look for something else, I think takes a curiosity and a sense of courage. I moved to San Francisco, sight unseen. I didn't know a single person there, but I knew what I wanted to create in my career was there. And so I moved, to a different country and then across the continent. And, I've lived in New York, as you said, Philadelphia, Reno. I lived in Ottawa for a bit in Canada, and all of these places, I think I've always been curious, and I've always had this question of what else is possible? What else is out there for me? What else might I create if I changed my environment?
I love that, because I think, I think we're kindred spirits. I have also moved to lots of places, many of them where I knew nobody, and I didn't necessarily know if the job or the opportunity was going to work out. But I think it is that passionate curiosity, isn't it? That constant drive to think about what else can I learn? What else might be possible if I changed perspective? And I'm guessing, but I'd love your thoughts on this, that a lot of that features in the work that you do. When we've got high stake challenges and we're looking to create new possibilities or transforming results, one of the biggest things we've got to get over is what we already know, isn't it? What we're telling ourselves. So is that something you find comes up a lot in the work that you do?
Absolutely. So there, anytime we have a curiosity or even a hunch, right? You have a gut feeling, or you think you're curious about creating something. What I like to say is, so that's you have a hypothesis of what might be possible, or what you think you can do, but you don't know because you haven't quite done that thing before. You might have some historical data points of something similar, but you've never quite done this thing in this place, in this context. And so the only way to find out what you can do or what's possible is to run an experiment, the same way a scientist would. And, this is at least something I learned in high school, like what makes up an experiment? Well, you have a hypothesis, you have certain parameters for the experiment, right? Like, how will you know if it's a success or not? What are the variables that go into the experiment? What's the container? Like, how long are you running this experiment for? And you run it, right? And you go and test out. Like in this case, just a previous example, what happens when I move to San Francisco to pursue a career in tech?
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to Montreal if nothing works out, or maybe something that I couldn't possibly imagine will transpire. And whether the results of your experiment are positive or suboptimal, it's all good. It's all a lesson, right? If an experiment doesn't work out, that's not a failure. That's just a lesson, right? As long as you're running tight experiments with quick feedback loops, that's an insight that'll help you figure out the next step.
Oh, I love that, because I think sometimes we hold ourselves back because we make the step seem too big, too overwhelming, there's no coming back from it. And I love that, thinking about reframing that as being, it's just an experiment. One of the things that I've learned through life is that everything in it is either a lesson, a blessing, or both. So in the moments that I don't feel that blessed, you look for the lesson, and it's like, oh, that's what we're supposed to learn, because that's going to be how I improve the next experiment, to use your idea. And I think bringing it to that way, that's going, actually, with the thing with experiments is we want to do more of them, don't we? So the idea is each one should help feed the next one. And so reframing the way we think about that allows us to take away some of the fear, because I think that's part of the challenge, isn't it? I read some research, and I'd love your thoughts on this, where they did studies on the fact that they had a group of people that had constantly praised for their success. So every time they got it right, that's what they got praised for. And they had another group of people who were constantly praised for their effort. The fact that they kept trying, they kept iterating, they kept going back and looking for, what have I learned in here and how might I apply it? Both the positive and the negative. And over time, what you found was the group that were praised for success performed worse than the group that were praised for effort, because they started to fear failure. They feared if they couldn't guarantee success, they weren't even going to try. And so there's a lot of that rewiring that needs to be done, isn't it, in our brains, that says, what is it we've been telling ourselves for these years? Why are we so convinced this is all we can do, or we have to do it this way? Because that experimental element allows you to challenge that thinking, doesn't it? Because you can go, well, that's my hypothesis, but what if the opposite were also true? Is that how you help people to kind of start to think about those big scary transformations that you help them with?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of high performers there is some fear around failure. And that can be a really big bottleneck to creating what it is you really want, because you need to be willing to risk, quote unquote, failure to create something new. What I would say is, sorry, pause.
That's good.
Can you remind me the question again?
Yeah. So I was talking about, that mindset shift, that being able
right.
to
Right. Got it.
Yep. Okay. Ready. So would you say that mindset shift, the piece where people have got to question and be comfortable questioning their own thinking, what they're telling themselves, and turning that into that next hypothesis, which is, well, I've thought this all along, but what if the opposite were also true, is one of the areas people have to address to make that transformational change?
Absolutely. I think, a mindset, and maybe you've heard of this, or your listeners have heard of this before, but this all or nothing thinking is also like a culprit here. If you believe, I can either fail or not fail, and then that's it. No, right? There's a lot of in between. There's a lot of gray. There's learning. And when you can shift your mindset to, there's areas of gray, and, even if I quote unquote fail, well, now I have more data. I have more insight. I know what's better for me or my market or my team or whatever it is. I can now leverage that to propel myself forward. And shifting your mindset, even in that capacity, is really powerful, because it, in my experience and what I see with my clients, is it gives you more courage. You have a greater risk tolerance to continue trying new things. And when you have a greater risk tolerance and when you have more courage, it increases your learning velocity, right? You're more quickly running experiments. You are then learning more quickly, whether it's, again, a suboptimal result or a positive result. And that velocity of learning is really, especially in startups, you're a competitive edge, right? There are so many things you don't know, and the quicker you can learn, the greater your chances of success.
I love that, because I think that's true, isn't it? That it's in that continual learning, it's in that helping evolve. And actually, as leaders, if we can get comfortable with that view of constantly learning, of constantly iterating on what we're doing, then we can actually create a culture where our people can do the same. But what I would love to know is there a simple way to think about our company culture and how we might assess what changes, if any, need to be made?
Yeah. So there's a model I like to use. It's called lift and thrust. This was coined by a mentor of mine, Robert Ellis, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year. But essentially, you think about a culture, and a culture that is, let's say, a high performing culture, has two key things. Number one is it has a lot of lift. And what do I mean by lift? Lift is what makes an employee excited to get out of bed on Monday morning and go to work. What is making them feel good about where they work, about who they're working with, and what they're working on, just to give a simple example. The other piece that's important to high performing culture is thrust. And when I say thrust, I mean, what are the things in a culture that are enabling the people who work there to do their best work? For example, do they have the tools they need to do their job? Is the company, growing at a speed in which, it's demanding more of them and they're able to keep doing that? It's really what's driving the people forward. And so you want a good balance or mix of stuff that is lifting people up to feel good, but also what's pushing them, I don't know if this with the mirror, or driving them forward. And, I like to call that like a jumbo jet culture, like it's taking off and into the air. how can you kind of see, and the opposite of that? So if you have a lot of lift, well, the downside of that would be, oh, you might have a culture that has too much weight.
Yeah.
Weight being, people don't want to get up and go to work on Monday, or they're dreading it, or they don't feel psychologically safe, whatever. There could be a bunch of things that weigh them down. And then on the opposite of thrust, there's drag. Like, what are things that are, holding people back from doing their best work, that get in the way of them performing or doing, performing at the level they could be performing. And so you've got like this quadrant, and obviously you want to be in the top right quadrant. And, even some simple questions that I love to very simply and easily check in with individuals or teams as a whole is, what do you think is getting in the way of you doing your best work right now? What are some things in your day to day, or that you see at the company or on your team, that are creating drag or
Okay.
weight? And obviously, you create some shared language, right? You got to explain to people what you mean by these terms that I just shared. But it's or even at an offsite, I've had clients use this at an offsite. They draw this like lift and weight, drag and thrust kind of quadrant, and they have people kind of share, where do we feel like we are right now as a company culture on this graph? Okay, we're too much. We've got too much drag. We have lift, but too much drag. Great. What are some things we can do to create more thrust?
Yeah.
And it really helps you kind of zoom out, but then also like focus in and figure out what are some actual tactical things we can do to move us in the direction we want to be in.
I love that, because it gives people that, and you said it earlier, that psychologically safe space to say where I am, because it is that open forum. I remember one of the questions that I always used to ask when I went into a new company was, can I ask what's the daftest thing we make you do every day? The
I
thing.
love that question. It's a brilliant question and a disarming question.
Yeah, because it was like, I guarantee you think we know, and I also guarantee we have no idea. So that's a really good place for us to start with some of that low-hanging fruit. That's going, we can get rid of some of this, or we can explain why you have to do it, because sometimes in regulated environments, you have to do these things because you have to do these things because somebody tells you. But I love that by creating that commonality of language with that lift and thrust and weight and drag, you're allowing them to label what it is, and gain that one sense of direction. Because I think that's also crucial in what you were sharing, is you're giving them that common language, you're giving them that common purpose. And one of the things I see is that's often one of the biggest causes of things going wrong, is there is lack of common clarity on exactly what we're trying to, what they're trying to achieve, and how you're trying to get there. Is that something that you've seen in the work that you do?
Absolutely. I think all of us, and especially leaders, can get into trouble when we assume what we think and understand is what everyone else kind of assumes and understands. I think we can see it even play out at a more macro level, like in politics, right? People are like, how could you think this when it's that? So expectations, setting clear expectations rather, and communicating those things clearly and being explicit about them are really, really important to make sure everyone is on the same page, from like a culture standpoint, a strategy standpoint. And oftentimes, when I'm working with leaders, this tends in different ranges, but this is a challenge for most clients. And I'll have clients who come to me and say, I want to improve my executive presence, or I want to improve how I communicate with my team. And people think, oh, I need to change the pitch of my voice and body language. And yes, sure, some people, that's great, right? Thumbs up. But it's really, if you can nail the simple things here when it comes to clear expectations and communication, I really think of this as this is the 20% that's going to give you 80% of the output. And it's really three things: Number one, it's being clear. So are you clearly communicating what your expectations are, what you want to see, what the strategy is, what your specific feedback for this person is, right? Are you being clear, not beating around the bush? Are you being explicit, right? Are you specifically saying what you want? Again, like not beating around the bush. If someone's not performing, telling them specifically, explicitly, this is the thing you're doing that's not working. And being direct, right? When people are processing information, right? Maybe you've been to, right? Have you ever gone to a talk or a conference and you're sitting with your colleagues listening to the talk and you all take away different things after the talk? You're like, oh, I loved how this person said this. And oh, really? I really tuned in when they were talking about that. We all process and take away different things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, of course, when leaders are, setting expectations, communicating what they want to see, what the strategy is, we forget that our employees are also picking up on different bits and maybe ignoring or not hearing other parts. And so, I mean, number one, it's important to, I always like to tell my clients, if you don't feel like you're being a broken record when it comes to like vision and strategy and goals, that's probably not a good thing. You need to be repetitive because every time you say something, people are taking away slightly different things. And also, you need to be direct and specific because you don't want to you don't want to let people take away the wrong interpretation, right? You want to be as clear as possible.
Yeah.
Which I, clients, folks who are empathetic, you have critical feedback. You don't want to be harsh. It's a fine balance between, well, how do I deliver this in a compassionate way without missing the main point, right?
Yeah. It's so true. And I think very, very often, or the challenge when you've got some critical feedback to give to people is you're both having a different conversation because you're talking about their impact and they're talking about their intention. So they weren't trying to get it wrong. They weren't trying to mess up. And so sometimes reframing that conversation to start with, this is what I think you're trying to achieve. I think you're trying to do a good job. I think you're trying to be a great team player. I think you're trying to do this. Yeah, I am. Brilliant. Let's now talk about what's actually happening, because that's not the impact that you're having. Can really help them kind of pull that back. But I think you're right. It's sometimes it's that it's a hard job being a leader, isn't it? Because people are complicated and messy, and we're ourselves included. Emotions get in the way. But what would you say from the clients that you've been working with? Have you noticed is a commonality that holds them back? I mean, we've talked about clarity of what it is they're trying to do and what's expected explicitly of their people to make that happen. But is there any other key things that you're like, actually, this one comes up a lot?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think something I see time and again is folks avoiding, let's just say like avoiding the uncomfortable thing. And that can be a variety of things depending on the person, but whether it's delivering hard feedback or giving a tough update to your board or having to let someone go or a difficult conversation with your co-founder, whatever it is, these difficult or uncomfortable moments, I have found in human nature, we want to kind of turn away from them and try to avoid them, maybe hope they kind of settle on their own. And that is really what slows down what I was talking about earlier with this velocity of learning. Because the sooner you can turn towards the uncomfortable thing, the sooner even that we can say that's running an experiment, right? Like, what happens when I turn towards this uncomfortable thing and say what needs to be said? The sooner you get the results you need, or the data you need, or the insights you need, and then the sooner and quicker you can then move on to the next thing. And I often see this, a dragging of feet of sorts to do the thing that needs to happen. And we can ask ourselves why. And it's, well, okay, leaders struggle sometimes, I think, with being liked versus being respected, not wanting to ruffle anyone's feathers. There's also sometimes doubt around, what are other people on the team or the board going to think? So there's some self-doubt there. But really, it's wanting to avoid discomfort that really messes with people. And the quicker you can get good at being uncomfortable and noticing, oh, I'm feeling some discomfort here around this conversation or thing I need to do, great. Like, that is a sign I need to turn towards that now. The better, the stronger of a leader and a more effective of a leader you're going to be.
Oh, I love that. I've always thought that one of the number one skills you need to learn as a leader is to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because the uncomfortable is a guaranteed to happen.
Yes.
And to your point, we sometimes avoid that. And yet when you get there, when you have that conversation, it never goes as badly as you thought. So all you do is rob yourself of the joy and rob your team of the progress.
Exactly. It's very rarely, we also have a tendency to catastrophize, right? And it's very, very rarely does that worst case scenario actually transpire. But as we're leading up to this conversation or difficult thing we need to do, we expend so much mental and emotional energy anticipating it that, again, robs us of creative output put towards other things, right? So as soon as we can turn towards that and get good at being uncomfortable and acknowledging, like, this is normal. And also it's a signal of, what do I need to, as a leader, we're always asking ourselves, what should I be focusing on next? What is the best use of my time? I love the notion that where you're feeling some discomfort or avoidance is the signal that is the thing right now that requires your attention.
It's so true. And yet we can, we can kind of fill our time with all these less pressing matters because they feel more comfortable, and it can be, it takes that leap, doesn't it, to kind of step into that uncomfortable and, to your point, lean into it and go, this is the bit I need to address. And yet when we learn that, and we go, actually, but the sooner I learn it, the sooner I'm going to go past uncomfortable, and I'm going to get, to your point, the lesson that I need to get the velocity back. I can't believe how fast it's gone. We're nearly out of time, and I've still got so many questions. But can I ask you? So you've talked a lot about curiosity, and as you know, curiosity is a passion of mine. So I would love to know, what are you most curious about right now?
I think what I am most curious about today, right now in this moment, is how I can continue leveraging AI to be an even more powerful executive coach and to continue to serve my clients even more powerfully. That is a question and a curiosity that is alive for me right now, and that I've been thinking about for some time with all, the advancements that have been coming out.
Oh, I love that, because I think and I have a similar curiosity. So one of my friends was like, "Kim, you're such a tech nerd," because I'm constantly looking for what else is out there, what else is next. Mm-hmm. But I think it's in that drive to your point, to constantly learn, to constantly see how we can amalgamate, because very often we as a society have put technology on one side and people on the other, and gone, you're either good at one or the other. And so I love when I meet people like you that go, no, we can do the two together. We can use both to actually grow together and be able to better serve. So Arielle, who is it that you help, and how do they get in touch with you?
So I work with CEOs and senior leaders who are, fed up with the status quo and are looking to create change and impact and are willing to do and think differently in order to do that. They can get in touch with me on my website, www.newpo.io. They can also find me on LinkedIn, Arielle Lechner, and send me a DM. And that's really the best way to get in touch with me.
Amazing. So for everybody listening and watching, if you didn't get to scribble that down fast enough, all of the ways to get in touch with Arielle will be in the show notes below. So please just take a look there, and be curious, connect with her and see where this next journey is going to take you. Arielle, it's been such a delight. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights, your curiosities, and your actionable steps where people can really start to question for themselves, how do they get that balance of making sure that the plane's taking off and not being pulled back. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all your reflections back and your own insights. I love hearing kind of what you had to say in response to what I was talking about. It was wonderful.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And for everybody listening and watching, I hope you found today's episode to be as insightful and inspiring as I did. And until next time, take care.